Hi, my name is Sarah Summar. I'm on the faculty at the Center for Musical Arts in Lafayette, Colorado, and I'm going to tell you about some of what you can look forward to when you attend the Colorado Music Festival's performances set for the evenings of August 1st and 2nd in Chautauqua Auditorium. In this program, the festival orchestra will be performing works by Kevin Putz, Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, and Antonin Dvořák. Peter Ungin conducting. We'll begin with Two Mountain Scenes. It was premiered by the New York Philharmonic in the summer of 2007. At that time, then up-and-coming American composer Kevin Putz had been commissioned to write an orchestral work to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Bravo Vail Valley Music Festival. Today, Putz is one of the most successful and artistically masterful composers in the world of contemporary classical music. He has 4 symphonies and 4 operas under his belt, including the Pulitzer winner opera Silent Night of 2012, and his critically acclaimed The Hours, produced in 2022 by the Metropolitan Opera. Inspired by views of the Rocky Mountains, the composer says of his Two Mountain Scenes that he set out to create a true showpiece. The first movement, marked maestoso, begins with a quartet of trumpets combined to create the sonic illusion of a single trumpet reverberating across the valley. The strings answer with lyrical melodies which rise and fall in long-breathed arches, suggesting the silhouettes of mountain peaks. The second movement, marked furioso, begins in the swirl of a mountain storm, with torrents of arpeggios played by the strings. Distant bells ring out in the valley far below. The woodwinds adopt their rhythms and press forward insistently, gaining momentum as the music builds to a climactic finish. Since this piece has not yet been commercially recorded, this performance is a special opportunity to hear a dazzling, career-launching orchestral showpiece, inspired by our stunning Colorado landscapes, and performed by our own virtuosic Colorado Music Festival Orchestra. What better way could there be to start this program of expertly performed great works? Next on the program is Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. And speaking of great performers, Grammy-winning concert violinist Augustin Hadelich was born to German parents in Italy in 1984. He exhibited exceptional musical talent at a young age and joined the student body of Juilliard School at age 19, giving himself a pathway to his spot in the international stage as a world-class soloist. Hadelich is now one of the most sought-after concert violinists in the world, admired by audiences and musicians alike, not just for his extraordinary technical prowess and soulful tone, but also for the depth and integrity with which he interprets great works of classical violin literature. For that reason, I will include in my commentary on Tchaikovsky's one and only violin concerto some thoughts from Maestro Hadelich himself. The Violin Concerto in D major, Opus 35 by Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, was composed in 1878. In a 2017 interview, Augustin Hadelich pointed out that despite having been composed in a particularly dark period of Tchaikovsky's life, the general mood of the Violin Concerto is a happy one. Some biographers speculate that this may in part reflect the glimmers of joy brought into the composer's life by his associations with the young violinist composer Josef Kotek. It is well documented that Tchaikovsky was deeply enamored with Kotek, and they had an intimate personal relationship as well as mutual admiration for one another's musical gifts. To this point, Tchaikovsky had, in 1877, dedicated his Valse Scherzo in C to the up-and-coming violinist composer. And it was less than a year later that a music-filled visit from Kotek inspired Tchaikovsky to set aside work on his G major piano sonata to compose this, his first ever violin concerto. That was the spring of 1878 in the Alpine village of Clarens, Switzerland, where Tchaikovsky had gone to recover from a recent divorce and subsequent suicide attempt. Joseph Kotek's visit to Clarens may have started as a gesture of love and support for his friend, but it quickly evolved into one of the most fatefully productive composer-performer collaborations in the history of classical violin music. Despite this, Kotek declined Tchaikovsky's offer to dedicate the concerto to him. Maestro Hadelich has also noted that audiences may notice that this work from the most celebrated ballet composer, arguably in history, features many dance-like phrasings and figurations that make it easy for listeners to envision choreographed scenes in the style of Swan Lake or Romeo and Juliet. Hadelich also points out that Tchaikovsky's love of Mozart and the principles of the classical style, like balance and grace in phrase structure, are just as influential as the Sturm und Drang aesthetic of the romantic style of the time in which the piece was written. Now, when violinist Adolf Brodsky premiered the concerto in Vienna in December of 1881, Tchaikovsky and Brodsky were both criticized harshly by esteemed music critic Edward Hanslick. This further sharpened the bite of the audience's tepid reception of the new concerto. Despite being poorly received at its Vienna premiere, the Tchaikovsky violin concerto has since had a remarkable life of its own that is still evolving today. The violinists Leopold Auer and Joseph Kotek himself who had both turned down opportunities to premiere the piece, did perform it not long after Brodsky's poorly received premiere. It was also famously performed by an 11-year-old Jascha Heifetz in his 1912 debut with the Berlin Philharmonic. And it has now, despite being exceptionally difficult to play and unusually long for a concerto, become a beloved staple of the violin repertoire. So let's take a closer look at the music. The nearly 20-minute first movement is marked Allegro moderato. I'd like to play the first and second themes of the Allegro for you, just to demonstrate how this movement features both very classical and very romantic approaches to melody. The first theme is the most reminiscent of Mozart's time, in that it is a rhythmically and harmonically balanced 4-bar antecedent phrase. I will count out the bars as I play it for you. You will notice that bars 3 and 4 are rhythmically almost identical to bars 1 and 2. Oops, I forgot to count. Let's try that again. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I find this theme to be very gracefully characterful, but also quite satisfying in its temporal symmetry. Now let's compare that with the second theme in A major. Again, I will count the bars as I play the first phrase of this section, marked con molto espressivo. This unabashedly romantic theme puts expression above all else by taking the juiciest bits, like the introduction of triplet rhythms, and stretching them out through a combination of repetition and chromatic expansion of the otherwise standard harmonic progression. Okay. Okay, so here is that second theme. Remember, 4 bars is the standard for phrase length. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not done. 5, 6. Right. So as you see, the standard 4-bar phrase structure has been expanded from within, creating a sublime push and pull of suspense and anticipation. And that is the very romantic element of this theme. When hearing this concerto, the composer in me finds it most interesting to focus on the way Tchaikovsky creates a seamless exchange between orchestra and soloist as they alternately present thematic material or provide background support to one another. The first and second movements in particular really highlight the fact that this isn't just a great violin concerto, it is also a great work of orchestral literature. Now I'd like to note that while it is a 3-movement work, the first movement has such fantastic ending and that it's become quite common and acceptable for audiences to applaud in a show of appreciation for the mastery and endurance that the Allegro moderato requires. Now, the second movement is an intimate, heartfelt canzonetta. It remains distinctly violinistic in its lyricism, while still suggesting the hushed introspection of a great tenor solo on a dimly lit opera stage. This is a wonderful opportunity to enjoy Maestro Hadelich's exceptionally rich tone and beautifully expressive phrasing. The finale, Allegro vivacissimo, is the most overtly Russian in its style. The rollicking electricity of the rondo theme was inspired by a Cossack dance. Yet, depending on the soloist's interpretation and the listener's point of view, we can either delight in the light-footed agility of the movement's spiccato passage work, or we can picture the vigorous twirling and boot stamping of a campfire-lit village dance, or a bit of both. In expert hands, the movement is a joy to listen to, despite being a tremendous challenge to the endurance of the soloist and orchestra. I hope you enjoy the unapologetic beauty of this composition and can appreciate it as an impressive show, as I do, as an impressive show of skill and musicality for the soloist without having a single moment of superfluous showboating. Maestro Hadelich has stated that unlike most violin concertos he has performed, his interpretation of Tchaikovsky's violin concerto in D major is always evolving, so that each performance he gives will be unique to that hall, that orchestra, that moment in time. And isn't that why we go to live performances in the first place? The second half of the program is Dvořák Symphony No. 7. highly regarded British musicologist Donald Tovey stated of Dvořák's Seventh Symphony that along with the four Brahms symphonies and Schubert's Ninth, it is among the greatest examples of this art form since Beethoven. Dvořák's ambitions for his Seventh Symphony were set not long after hearing Brahms's Third Symphony of 1883. This is significant as Brahms had been a valuable mentor and friend to the young Czech composer, helping him break into the world of mid-19th century classical music, which, like the politics of the day, was dominated by German and Austrian artists. Driven by his own intensely patriotic feelings and a desire to see the Czech people flourish, Dvořák resolved that his new symphony would reflect, in his words, the political struggles of the Czech nation, which by this time had now spent over 300 years under Habsburg rule, threatening the survival of the Czech language and culture. The struggle we hear in Dvořák's Seventh Symphony may be reflective both of the historical plight of the Czechs, but also of Dvořák's personal life at the time. When he composed the work, he would still have been grieving the recent deaths of both his mother and his eldest child. Excuse me. The first movements, brooding motives, are developed slowly and exhaustively. Expressively, you can hear a complex interplay between that sense of present struggle, past triumphs, and hope for the future of the Czech people. The opening theme of the Allegro Maestoso reminds us that Dvořák was a wonderful violist who knew how to use the dark, warm tones of the mid to low strings to great effect. You'll notice that the second half of this theme features a staccato falling third encircling the tonic D. Dvořák would have known that this short, distinctive musical idea or motive had tremendous potential to be developed exhaustively, giving the audience an easily identified snippet to grasp and hold in the ear as the movement takes us through a long, intriguing process of harmonic and dynamic growth. I like to think of this as the urgency motive. And I will play the first theme. I don't have a viola or a cello with me, so but I can play it on the violin. And you hear that ta-ta-ta rhythm happens 3 times, so instantly he shows us that's going to be important. Later, when the woodwinds present the second theme in B-flat major, which is marked dolce piano, it isn't long before the serenity of this new melody is disrupted by the urgency motive, soon to be explored more exhaustively in the development section ahead. The woodwind section is featured more prominently in the second movement, especially the beginning. It's a poco adagio, while the strings take a more supportive role. In addition to creating some variety and tone color of the overall work, starting with a handful of woodwinds creates the opportunity for tremendous dynamic growth that Dvořák achieves through well-placed expansion of the moment-to-moment instrumentation. Now, the third movement is a scherzo in trio, marked vivace poco meno mosso. This delightfully tuneful first theme features dance-like rhythms that are not only catchy, but also have great potential for development through rhythmic devices, such as syncopation and hemiola. Dvořák explores that potential for rhythmic development fully to great dramatic effect at the closing of the movement. And I will play that rhythm, so you will. I call this the theme most likely to be whistled in the restroom at the end of the show. Here we go, the scherzo theme. So there's something to listen for. The finale opens with a heart-tugging octave rise in the strings, once again creating a sense of urgency and longing that is sustained throughout the movement as we journey through a landscape of both tumultuous and heroic themes. I will play that theme for you now and do my best to convey the intended dynamic markings, particularly the sforzando on the unresolved secondary leading tone G sharp. These first three notes, much like the last three notes of the first theme in movement one, will constitute the most important motive to be developed throughout the movement. Okay. While American orchestras and audiences tend to favor Dvořák's Ninth Symphony over the Seventh, it remains internationally one of the most highly regarded examples of 19th century symphonic form. So, to recap, we will be opening with a contemporary American depiction of the Rocky Mountains by Kevin Putz, followed by Tchaikovsky's celebrated violin concerto in the hands of Augustin Hadelich. After intermission, we'll settle in for what is arguably Antonin Dvořák's most masterfully composed symphonic work. So again, I am Dr. Sarah Summar, and I thank you for watching this video and for all of the ways in which you support classical music and the Colorado Music Festival. Thank you.